talk with you because we have many and in the audience. Welcome very, very much to conversation. A great pleasure, personal pleasure, and intellectual pleasure to welcome to the program Diane Muntford, and she is billed on the screen and as a transgender activist.
Yes.
Which is very interesting in and of itself. I'm going to be learning a great deal. She's also got a great deal. She's been actress. She's been a number of things she's been involved with. But Diane, welcome so much for conversation.
Well,
great pleasure.
My pleasure entirely. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. We just finished a program with Mr. Clayton. Adam
Yes,
Clayton
I know. I met him. I was thrilled to meet him.
He's going to be running for the Congress. I don't know by the time this gets on the air. Well, there'll be another week or so to the election. But,
well, I do a political show myself. It's a public affairs show. It's on 10 p.m. on Thursday evenings. How redundant, p.m. evenings. It's on at 10 p.m. on Thursdays on Channel 34.
Good, okay.
And we have had many assembly members, Dick Gottfried, Linda Rosenthal, Micah Kellner, so many, you know.
Yeah, okay, good. But I wonder if you could, we have 58 minutes. That's a long time in television.
Yes.
You're looking great and everything.
Well,
but
so are you.
Could you share your background? Born and raised and that sort of thing,
Okay.
education. And and then this thing about transgender, I want to get into that. I don't understand it, but could you share your own background,
Sure.
please?
I was born in New York City. I was educated in New York, Manhattan, Madrid, Spain. I know that sounds strange. I am a classically trained actress. I studied with Michael Moriarty. I was a stand-up comic. I was an MC in an S&M club. I have done it all. I mean, you know, Bakers Bake, Actors Act. They offered me a job as an MC. I said, sure, why not?
Why not? Yeah. But you were born in New York, huh?
Yes, I was.
And the family and everything?
My mother was from Spain. The reason I'm in politics, or you know, was in politics for a moment in my life, my grandfather, Don Basilio Alvarez Rodriguez, was a Spanish politician. He was known as the father of the poor, el padre de los pobres. He gave his money away to poor people. He was one of the founders of the Spanish Republic in 1931. He was a Supreme Court justice ultimately, and that's why we're here.
That was your mother's father?
That was my mother's father.
Wow,
but we had to leave Spain, or rather they had to leave Spain because, as you may have heard, the Civil War was won by the fascists. We're the opposite side. We're, you know, for whom the bell tolls.
Yep.
Well, it tolled for us. So we had to leave, and then so we wound up here, and my mother met and married my father, and here I am now.
So your mother came from Spain, met your father here.
Yes.
What was your father's background?
He was Scottish and Irish. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland. Hey, y'all.
Baltimore?
Baltimore. And he was, well, he was an engineer. My mother was a writer. And they, you know, they had one kid, I met. At least I think my father had one kid. I know my mother only had me.
That's pretty wise of the Jewish to always have a figured matrilineal because you always know who your mother is.
Yes, but we're not Jewish. We're Catholic.
No, but
so
I mean, it's still a good idea, perhaps. Yes.
Yes. Well, my father got around, you know. Yeah. He was a very friendly kind of guy, too. Pretty young women.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
That's a gender issue we can talk about, maybe.
Yeah. That's a total gender issue.
Yeah. But anyway, Spain. And you spent time, I heard you say.
Yes, I spent 2 years in Spain, got time off for good behavior. But no, it was Franco, Spain. When I was 15, my mother died of uterine cancer at 44, poor woman. And I loved her to distraction. I still miss her.
Sorry.
I know. Yeah. But anyway, so my father sent me off to school in Spain with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who was going to Spain anyway. So I went with her, and I went to school there and majored in drama. And when I got back...
What age were you there? When you
I was 15 years old, but I went to the University of Madrid because in Spain you graduate from high school, or at least at that time, graduated from high school at 16. I was from New York. I was bilingual. My grandmother had a cousin who smoothed things over, and I got into the University of Madrid in the drama department. If I'd wanted to be a med student, they would have said, get lost. But nobody respected actors in Spain in those days. So yeah, the drama. You got the cash? Yes, you're in.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. That's. I'm afraid they don't respect the arts as much as they ought to in much of the world.
I
But
know,
yeah,
I know, I know.
But anyway, yeah, that's it. So you had 2 years there. That's
Yep.
a long time. Formative years too.
Well,
And-
yes, from 15 to 17.
And you were doing theater, right, and everything.
Well, no, I was studying theater. The problem was that I was studying Spanish drama of the Cervantes era. In other words, the Spanish counterpart of Shakespeare. And it was very, I mean, you know, Spanish is my first language. Even though I was born in New York, we spoke Spanish at home. But when you're trying to do, you know, 15th century Spanish drama in Spanish, and you're an American hippie, it's not so easy.
That would be hard. That would be hard. Do you ever have to try and read Beowulf or something? Going back to Old English.
Thank God, no. But it was bad enough to do archaic Spanish things.
Yeah.
I did, however, love people. The 20s comedies. The Jardiel, for example, is the Spanish equivalent of Lonsdale. I was very good, and that's so conceited of me. I was very good at those things. But I was, and I loved it. I love comedy.
So.
I later became a stand-up comic.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I respect stand-up comics enormously.
Well, you're the one, because the audience sure didn't. They hate comics, but okay, yeah.
They hate comics?
Well,
I couldn't live in a world without the comics. Zero Mostel and George Carlin was one of my heroes. I wept when he died.
Well,
you know, I mean, because they're poking fun at the system, which I am inclined to do. But something about language. You say you're fluent. Your first language is Spanish.
Yes.
You speak Castilian.
Yes, I do.
Is there a big difference between Castilian and what's done in Latin America? And
yes,
so forth?
there is.
Is it more than just the southern accent or draw, or what? Or how much difference is there?
Castilian is from Madrid, de Castilla, and we tend to lisp because we had a king who lisped, and it was good form in the Spanish court to lisp, and so everyone in Madrid lisps. For example,
Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Barcelona. And that's where that comes from?
That's where that comes from.
From a king?
Yes, who may have been a queen because he lisped, but there you go.
Right. That's interesting. Yes. I hadn't thought of that. You know, but it is different. But the language is the same. 15th century, big difference between 15th century Spanish and current, just like there is in English.
Well, yes, there is. Exactly. Yeah. Basically the same difference that would exist in Old English versus contemporary American English, yes.
Well, Old English, going back to Beowulf, I could never make sense out of that. That's really Old English. It's funny how languages emerge. I don't know how many there are. Somebody said something like about 5,000 languages there are. 1,000 were American Indian languages, which bespeaks geographical isolation. But anyway, and then we've got you, Bill, dear. Maybe you could share fill us in. Transgender activist. Now, transgender, what is that? What is that? What does it mean? And what is the implications? And so
Transgender means that I was born in one gender, male, and transitioned to another gender, female. I did that when I was 15 with my parents' blessing and encouragement because I was the short, effeminate little red-haired thing. And as soon as I transitioned, suddenly everything worked and clicked and everything seemed of a piece. I'd say of a whole, but you would misinterpret it. Of a piece. In other words, everything was going in the same direction.
That's really interesting to me.
Well,
that's really interesting. What does that mean? You transition. I don't quite understand what that means. You take hormones?
That's what you do.
It's a hormone thing. It's not surgery or something
well,
like
you
that.
can do surgery, but many of us today feel that we are not going to let the straight or heterosexual world dictate what constitutes a man or what constitutes a woman. So while some of us do opt to have sex reassignment surgery, who exactly assigns sex? That's what I'd like to know. Many of us choose to be non-ops. In other words,
Non-what?
Non-ops.
Non-ops.
Well, we refuse to have operations because we feel...
operations.
Yes, that really no one is in a position to tell us how to live or what our anatomy should be or how to define ourselves or our gender.
That is the thing. It's and mostly it's done. Forgive my ignorance. Mostly it's done through hormone therapy or
hormone therapy, and also there's a certain inner something that that signals gender, I must say. I mean, so one's essence might have something to do with it, I think.
It's really interesting. So when you were young, you were born, and on the birth certificate it said male.
Yes,
right?
it did.
And it did. And then you lived with that, and then you had certain feelings and thoughts about the world. I heard you say in a telephone conversation, when I said that I have great I love children, and you said I don't like children because I had so many bad experiences.
Well, sure.
With children when I was young.
Well, I was shorter than most kids. I was always the shortest kid in the class. I had red hair, which is not a shortcut to popularity.
That's your mother. That's Welsh, right? Or Irish?
I'm Scottish.
Scottish, yeah.
I was effeminate. In short, other kids hated me, so why would I like children? No, I don't particularly like children, mainly because children did not particularly like me.
Why didn't they like you?
Because
you were effeminate.
Yes,
right?
and short and red-haired.
Well, what's wrong with being red-haired? Marino hair was red-haired.
Well, yes,
and
but
there were other people that were red-haired.
Yes,
people,
but apparently it was, I guess. But they used to joke about Campbell soup and carrot top and all this silliness. My real last name is Campbell, so.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But it's really interesting. The whole idea of gender is really interesting. So when you were young, let's say you're in school and everything, did you have what would be called what do you call it?
Homoerotic feelings?
Homoerotic impulses and so forth.
Well, yes, but I went to Catholic schools, so it was mainly the priest who had homoerotic impulses towards us, which was actually sort of a turnoff. You know, I mean, when 45-year-old men are chasing 6-year-old boys, this is not good, folks. But especially when they catch them, God help us all.
Did that happen with you?
Yes, it did.
Were you assaulted ever?
I was. I was at St. Joseph's summer camp in upstate New York, and at the age of 6, a priest got a little too friendly. In short, when a priest tells you to get down on your knees, watch it. That could mean anything. So anyway, am I making myself clear?
No, not really. I don't know. You were.
I was drugged and raped by a priest when I was
God.
6 years old.
How horrible.
Well,
really?
yeah, really.
And you were designated a male.
Yes. Although it would be just as bad if I'd been a little girl, don't you think?
Yeah, different. They have the altar boys and things like that and everything. And there's been all these things in the Catholic Church, all that pent up whatever.
Well, this was in 1962, but...
But did you have feminine? You said you were feminine. You had feminine inclinations.
Yes, but I was.
Here's
the thing. I was like this 35-year-old Hollywood glamour girl when I was a 5-year-old boy. So I mean, I was not.
What does that mean? You mean you were very attractive, or
no? Well, no. God bless you. No, but I mean, I loved makeup. I loved clothes. My mother had been an actual Hollywood glamour girl. She tried to make it as a movie star. She later became a writer for 20th Century Fox Movietone here in New York. But I grew up in a sort of haze of mid-century Hollywood-style glamour and stuff.
Right,
so
right. No, I got you. Yeah, photo play.
Exactly, exactly.
Right,
one of our favorite magazines, you know, Screenland, movie stars, yes,
all that going on.
Right.
But you had there are people who are called homosexuals, people that are like males who feel female in that. And then,
yes, but I mean,
did you think of yourself as having homosexuality?
I was just shocked when I found out. I went to school and I found out I was a boy. Nobody told me.
What do you
God.
mean, your mother? How can you have gotten to be where you went to school?
Well, I was an only child.
Girl?
I never saw anyone else naked. Remember, that was a long time ago. People did not run around naked years ago. And who knew, you know? I mean, I was surprised, you know?
That's really interesting to me because I would have thought everybody knew their gender, but I guess...
Well, I guess I took it for granted that I was a girl until I was told otherwise. Go figure.
But you had a penis and testes and all that kind of stuff,
yes.
if I may. Okay. And you had that in... But you had... I heard you say you were feminine in your... What, you were like homosexually inclined.
Yes. Although I wasn't very sexual because, again, if you go to Catholics...
You're in the latent period.
Well, no, even at post-puberty, I was not exactly, you know, the sexiest thing going because Well, when your introduction to sex is being drugged and raped by a priest when you're 6 years old, you're not going to wind up an nymphomaniac.
That was one incident or more than one? Or what?
I don't remember.
No,
and I really don't want to go there anyway.
Oh, you don't want to go there? Okay, we won't go anywhere you don't want to go.
So, you know, I mean, that was not a pleasant experience. So,
I would think. Yeah.
Well, so, you know, I've never...
Traumatic? Was it traumatic?
Most people would say that being drugged and raped at any age is, yes, sort of traumatic. What happened was he invited me to dinner, and the next thing I knew, I awakened in my bunk in the dormitory in my pajamas with a very sore bum. And guess what happened? I wasn't entirely unconscious when he did it because my grandmother, my Spanish grandmother, always told me, always leave a little something on the plate and a little something in your glass because it's very vulgar to wolf everything down. And,
I remember that.
Yeah. So I didn't drink everything in the glass. A friend of mine said, well, even if he just gave you wine, if you're a 6-year-old, that's going to knock you out. Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. But you had bad experiences with your fellow people in kindergarten and stuff like that?
Well, yes, of course. Well, when I was, say, 6, 7 years old, I was playing around with my mother's makeup, and she would absolutely freak because, so she bought me my own makeup so I wouldn't mess with hers, which was very nice of her. My mother was very advanced. She was a brilliant woman, and she was ahead of this time, never mind her own time. She died in 1971, and she is ahead of the time we are in right now. She was just brilliant and beyond convention. Some people are. So there you are.
And she was at the theater, and so she had a sense of style and a sense of flair.
Yes,
and a
she
sense
did.
of,
yes. I wish I'd brought a picture of her. She was beautiful.
I think
she looked.
Yeah.
She looked something like Joan Collins, actually.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, well, that's right. And she had that and everything. And they had these feminine. I think women are much more, on the whole, most women are feminine. I think.
Unless they're butch lesbians or choose not to be feminine because they consider it a kind of patriarchal trap, you know.
Right. It's a big issue in the way society's divided up. It has been, I guess, for a long time and everything. But, you know, there are, men are dull compared
well, speak for yourself. I mean, you know, I sort of like them. Or
well,
do you mean sartorially?
Like I mean like in terms of style and
but
so forth.
They are not allowed to stretch. During the late 60s, there was the so-called peacock revolution, and then for one moment, in 200 years, since the Industrial Revolution, for one moment, men were allowed to have a sense of individuality and style. Since then, it's
gone...
When
was that poem? About 1970?
1965, 64 to 1976, give or take.
In that period. I agree with you. That's a major period of transformation in the whole evolution of consciousness.
Exactly.
In my view. I would get to that.
But,
go ahead,
but men are strongly penalized by their own patriarchal system, oddly enough, for displaying too much fashion originality or fashion flair. They're accused of being, and accused as in quotes, of being homosexual. And we know that that's the kiss of death, isn't it?
Well, I was just thinking, like, if you look at the Senate of the United States and you look at it, it's all blue and gray suits. Unless you see any color, you know that's going to be a lady. The ladies have a sense of style.
Well, they're allowed to.
Maybe. Okay, that's interesting. They have a sense of style, and let's put up some curtains and things like that. And men are just like so dull. But that's all I'm saying. They don't have any sense of style.
But they are penalized
They order
for
the same damn suit year after year after year, and if you never think about change, you never think about putting up new curtains, never think about style. Homosexual men seem to be interested in, you know, good workmanship, style, the way art, and these kind of things.
Although you can't really generalize or stereotype gay or straight people. I mean, there are straight men who dress beautifully, and there are gay men who look like mendicants. So, I mean, you can't say that, you know, one group is stylish, one group is not.
Well, okay, so what we're talking about is gender, and that's a big issue, you know, in terms of evolution. I've been just reading Dorian Sagan. Again, it came up because he's the son of Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist,
wonderful, yes.
And his mother's probably the leading biologist in the world, Lynn Margulis. She's brilliant. If she wasn't associated with James Lovelock, she'd probably be recognized that way. She is, but there are people who she's with the Gaia principle and James Lovelock and the view of consciousness there. But I was reading, because he wrote a book, that is Dorian, with another guy, Taylor Folk. It was called Sex and Death. And it was about sex, and then the other part, you turn it over, and the other part was about death. These are two big issues that confront the human condition and everything like that. And through the evolutionary process, 3.8 billion years, the sex thing didn't come in until about halfway through it. In terms of the organic evolution of things in the universe, it was they made a transition from pre-organic to early unicellular things. Most of the bacteria is not sexual. It got to a certain point before there was a break-off in the evolutionary process to where sexual reproduction or recombinant exchange of genetic information happened and everything like that. And then also they got down to talking about it as a major feature in terms of people understanding the human. So you have male and female. And I personally, I just spoke to Shanti, one of our people here, and I think people ought to stop thinking about sex in terms of gender. I think they ought to start thinking about it, and this is a little bit off the beaten path, I think they ought to start thinking about male and female functions in universe, and that there are apparently two things that exist at all levels, right down to the molecular level. There's compression, and if you can get an image, there's compression, and if you get an image, it's like you get a three-dimensional image like a soccer ball, there's compression within a system, right down even molecular and so forth. And then there's also what they call tensional integrity that goes through the system. So it goes through the system. And early on, the unicellular cellular form, it would be like steady state. You're steady state, and and you're in a state for millions of years. There's evolutionary steady state, so you're in this state. Unicellular spongiforms, reproducing, making more all the time and everything. It'd be like people in a thing and saying, "This is cool. Let's put up some curtains. Let's make it really nice." You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That would be, and they're like that, right? And then there's an impetus to move vertically through it. That is, if we go through it and give tensional integrity, that would be, and that exists at all levels of reality. You have this tensional integrity.
At all levels of reality that we know exist.
Yeah, within the world of scientific understanding of molecular science and all that kind of stuff. So you've got two things that exist, and the one could be, it's a little hard because it's a new idea. People are all thinking about sex in the normal thing like page 6 and all that kind of stuff, and all the ludicrousy and everything that goes on with courting and all that sort of thing and everything, and the sex is very important, and they think of it that way. But I think we'd be better if we thought about, most women seem to be feminine.
No, but you've said that. No, that's not true.
You don't think that's true?
I think that's entirely a social construct. I think that gender in general is a social construct. I think that you can't really say women are feminine, men are masculine, because the masculinity and femininity are inventions. They isolate certain traits and say, okay, these traits are feminine, and then they isolate other traits and say these traits are masculine, and then they encourage people with female genitals to accept feminine gender norms, and persons with male genitals to accept masculine gender norms, but they are all contrived. I mean, there is no such thing as innate gender behavior. The only innate gender behavior is, I am woman, you are man, let's do it, and have kids, and that's nature, okay.
That's been important, as recombinant distribution of genetic things,
yes,
the reproduction process.
But that is the only innate sexual characteristic, I think. I really think that everything else is learned behavior, don't you?
Well, I have a tendency to favor learned behavior. Nurturing is really important and all that kind of stuff, and you got all kinds of stereotypes, and history is a nightmare of injustice and everything like that. But there's also...
Well, the present is a nightmare of injustice.
No, history is a nightmare. That's James Joyce. He had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare.
Again, yes, again.
Or if...
Molly Bloom.
Molly Bloom, or again, yes, yes. But no, if you say history is a nightmare, and I think it is, and history would, if you get 3.8 billion years for the beginning of organic process in this
Now,
universe,
what exactly does this have to do with being transgendered?
Well, I'm saying that for half of that period, there was no differentiation or recombinant.
But there is now, and now's when we live.
Since all the bacteria, we walk in a sea of bacteria. There's a great deal of reality that has nothing to do with
In other words, hello, ladies and germs?
Well, no, it's a little hard because it's something new thinking,
yes.
right? So new is different and everything. And also science tells us, because they have the genome now.
Yes, amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. And that they were able to do that so fast. They thought it was going to take 100 years, and then the computer comes and they could speed it up. We got a genome we can read. They got the reading of the mind. They got a reading. They can do all kinds of things. And so we're becoming more and more knowledgeable. But as I read it and everything like that, there is not. There is a great deal of difference, genetic, not nurture, genetic, between a male and a female, a Homo sapiens.
Yes, but most scientists are male, and they would naturally enough ascribe superior traits to the male.
No, not superior, different. They're different.
Different, but somehow not equal.
Well, okay.
Don't forget, we do live in a patriarchy, and science is an extraordinarily patriarchal system.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't color the fact that comes out in the end of what does, is that there is, on the average and that sort of thing, there's a difference between a male and a female human being, and it's not just plumbing or something, it's through the whole system, and that it's something on the order, at a level of genome, there's a difference. And there are variations, but there's a difference almost on the average of about 1.5% between an average female Homo sapien and a male.
But they've been saying that forever, and they always figure out a way to make it seem scientific.
It is.
No, but in the 19th century, they said, well, women are moved to hysteria and easily frightened, and then and they said, and this is scientific fact, and it wasn't.
It wasn't.
It was scientific fact,
well, all right,
as suited the then patriarchal system.
Well, yeah, but
so you cannot really say this is fact, immutable fact, because facts are not immutable. They change with each generation. Exactly.
The universe is synergetic.
No, every generation thinks it has the final word on everything, and no generation ever has the final word on anything, because there is no final word.
Okay, I believe in that too. I think that too. There's a priori mystery. It's synergy. The universe is synergetic in the evolutionary process, and we happen to be 220,000 years into the course of human evolution.
As far as we know, that could change tomorrow. The figures always change. They expand, they contract. No one knows really how long a time, how short a time we've been.
Okay, but there are generalized principles that do apply.
Well, but they keep changing.
Well, they do, not generalized principles. They won't if you do. There's elements. We get the elements, Mendeleev, and that. We get certain things that we do, and it builds up. And we know more all the time. And what we're able to know all the time, in fact, we're at a time of qualitative, we may be at the end of the human experience. We've now been able to extend human consciousness through technology, tools, and weapons to the point where they exist at such a point that if they were unleashed in an accident like we've been doing throughout this patriarchal thing where you go and steal from the other group, realpolitik, all of that, and for your own tribe, the patriarchal things and everything like that, if they were to be unleashed in another spasm of hatred like that, it would mean the end of our species. And as far as we can tell, the mitochondrial DNA, it's traced through the matrilineal line and everything. It's 200,000 years ago that Homo sapien appeared out of Homo habilis up the evolutionary line.
As far as we know. But
yes,
of course,
you can't take that position and say nothing is real. You can't do that. You can't.
But nothing is real.
No, okay. Well, then there's a song that the Beatles sang about that.
Yes,
I think.
Strawberry Fields Forever.
Right. That was a hell of a good song.
Yes,
too.
it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Anyway, I think that makes sense. You read science and that it goes and everything, but there is about that difference. If you take what would be accepted by really good biologists and people who measure, there was no way in the 19th century they could. They didn't have the genome.
No, but they didn't realize there are things that exist now that we don't know exist, and we will know a generation or 2 or 3 or 7
Thank
from now.
God.
No,
they're making progress.
And of course, there's that man in the U.S. Patent Office who in 1893 said, We really should close the patent office because really everything has been invented.
Right, that's right. I remember that.
You
yeah,
know,
I know. Yeah,
I mean, you cannot, we do not have the last word. No one will ever have the final word on anything.
Well,
so in that sense, nothing is real.
Could you have said the same thing about, as we know, you understand, you're intelligent, and you know, like there was Australopithecine, okay? You had Lucy 4 million years ago.
But then they found earlier skeletons.
We found one up in Chad now,
yes.
and everything, and it's coming all the time. It's changing, but that there was we're not going to deny evolution, and that there was.
Oh no, I don't deny evolution.
Okay,
at all.
that's a principle, but there are a lot of religious people who want to do it. They deny it.
Well, they also deny me. They also despise trans folks.
Yeah, that's all just sort of human ignorance and so forth.
Exactly, and they detest science as well because it debunks their long-cherished theories of creation and everything.
Well, yeah, it's a nightmare of ignorance.
Exactly. And they feel righteous in their ignorance. They choose to be ignorant.
Well,
and they detest
gain
those.
Often.
Often they are so moronic and innocent that they feel that. Well, many religions say, you know, blessed are the ignorant. Sure, because the thinking people will tell you you're full of crap. You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but we're coming to understand, there's an explosion going on now. And when you get to the point where the extension of your consciousness, which is pretty unique to humanity, that you can extend...
As far as we know.
Well, I know, but you keep saying that as though nothing is able to be said ever about anything.
Well, I agree. I don't think...
I understand that, and I'm in that position, too. I think everything's up for grabs and up for change, synergetic. There's behavior systems unpredictable by the sum of the parts. A lot of it's socially conditioned, politically conditioned by people who want to have power over others, and all that history being a nightmare of injustice.
Those are immutable truths. Those are the only immutable truths.
We found one. It will always be unjust.
Exactly.
It always has been.
And certainly always will be.
I would submit it always has been. Some people think wandering and gathering tribes may have had some sort of an equality among the people, but by and large, in civilization, it's always been
in times of struggle, socialism does tend to come to the fore because everyone has to depend on everyone else. And certainly early humankind was in a struggle.
Most of our time we were running away from cats.
Exactly. So I'm sure that there was a certain, each according to his or her ability, each according to his or her need in those societies. But somewhere along the line, the money system was invented, and then, of course, someone wanted just a little more money than everyone else. Not meaning Bloomberg, of course.
That impetus that we were talking about. There are two things seemingly, and this is you've got compression. That's the best image for that. And I wish we could get somebody who knows how to make computers work to get the image. I think it would
God knows I don't. You know, I'm not the most
But
computer-oriented person.
But it would be like a soccer ball. You got a soccer ball, and it's round, and in a steady state, evolution, it's in steady state, and then there's an impetus that moves through it. It goes through like this, okay? And that's the impetus that drives the evolutionary process. And that impetus that goes through it could be in a certain loose kind of way associated with male. And the total, the whole encompassing whole, female, it operates at the molecular level. And so what we'd be looking for in terms of the time in which you and I live and everything is to have an impetus, the male principle. It isn't, penises and things like that, but it's an impetus to where you'd have something that would go through the whole and make the whole full.
Yes, but you can't say that that's necessarily male.
No, it's just expand your thinking. You're just thinking it's a thing that exists, and then it would be, and then you have, in evolution, you have steady state, then there's a quickening in evolutionary terms of the new species. And then you have what they call punctuated equilibrium. It's like coming to the end of a birth canal in a metaphor of birth. You're coming to the end of that, and then there is a very Eldridge and Stephen Jay Gould and others. Punctuated, it happens very quickly, and a new species appears. 99.9% of the species that have ever existed have gone extinct. And the new species appears, and that's a process that has been observant within the evolutionary process. We may be at the end of the human experience when we get We've been here 200,000 years, 10,000 generations.
That we know of, yes.
That we know of, best science. There's some people who are trying...
As of this time.
Not to talk about the spiritual things about... You know, the Jewish say it's the year 5,771. That's when the universe started. That's what they believe. I mean, it's sort of crazy and things. But anyway, that's another issue.
It's not logical. I mean, it's been proved that that's not the case.
Evolution, we both agreed.
Yes.
Okay, so you got that, and we're coming to the point now where the weapon systems are apparently species lethal. Couldn't do it as recently as the Second World War. We were impotent in this gestating state.
Yes, but by the 1950s, that was already a reality, the H-bomb, the A-bomb. So I think we've had...
No, it didn't happen by the modeling. It can only be tested by modeling. We didn't reach that point until about the year 1970. The weapons became species lethal in their capability. No single human being would survive an all-out
Do you think
unleashing.
that we will reach a point where we realize the folly of destroying everyone and perhaps dismantle these weapons?
That's the question before humanity now. The central question, why I'd like to get away from the gender thing. I'd like to get it put down in terms of the evolution of universal consciousness. And we may be coming, and what we need is attentional integrity that because the adverse side, what we're talking about is change, okay? And the adverse side of the destructive capability now in our hands, we've still got all the outdated notions of politics.
Excuse me, yes, but I don't think
and the patriarchy.
But I don't think that human beings change. I think that different fashions come about. But, for example, the Magna Carta, George W. Bush did away with much of the Magna Carta.
He would have tried. Yeah.
Yes, even though it had existed since, what,
Posse Comitatus, goodbye.
Yes, and then human beings are not innately good, to my way of thinking.
No sense taking that. Yeah.
So, I think that we can't think, well, we will progress to a point where we understand that it would be folly to destroy the human race and we will dismantle these weapons, because just the threat is a kind of power, as you know, and everyone wants power because that's part of the human experience.
Okay, that's part of the nightmare that is history.
And that, to a degree, is why I transitioned.
Okay.
As a woman,
that's why I'm very interested
as
in
a woman, I had a certain amount of power that I did not have as an effeminate man, because as an effeminate man, I ran afoul of the larger society, because when I transitioned circa 1971, at the age of 15, effeminate men, short men, any number of things wrong with me, those men were not respected, whereas women, especially those deemed at least vaguely attractive, which a few thousand years ago I was, did have a certain amount of respect from the larger society. So in a sense, my transitioning was not giving up male privilege, which I never had because I was not the ideal male, but embracing female privilege, which I seem to be rather good at, or was in those days.
Okay, that's very good. So that's very good. That's what we're talking about: transition, change, seeing things differently, and that's all that is before humanity now. Is how, or to pursue the thing about the destructive. That's very unique. That's existentially new. After 200,000 years, we did a program with Isaac Asimov, a famous polymath, and he said this is the defining time in the evolution of humanity, that we now reach a point where the weapons are species lethal. We've had a thing where the patriarchy or the weapon, all of the research has been led by research into scientific means of making war advantage for your tribe, to have the advantage to go cow another tribe, steal their grain, make you stronger, realpolitik, that whole male thing like that, Napoleon, Hitler, all this kind of nonsense has been going on in the name of that, realpolitik. It still undergirds and is the basis for the, and that context is all undergirds and underpins virtually all of our institutions we've inherited out of history, because we've built all those institutions within a framework that is being qualitatively transformed at a level of capability that we do not take adequate attention to. The fact that it should be up on everybody's consciousness that the weapon systems after about 1970 only, our time, the time you made your transition. When did you make your transition?
71.
70. It was right in that period.
Yes.
You're a great.
Was it something I said?
No, that was a time. That was a time. In my thinking, for whatever it's worth, and it doesn't make sense to anybody because everybody's, is that in the end of time, if we go for another few thousand years, we make this transition that we have to make now, humanity, collectively, within the thing. If we make the transition, all of time will not be measured from the time of Christ or from 5,771 years ago when the whole universe started or any of this kind of stuff that we had to deal with. Ever since we were Cro-Magnon, we had the ability to understand self-reflective consciousness, what's it all about questions, and we didn't have the means.
So what you're saying is that right now we are in a time of transition.
Year one is going to be figured from about the year 1970, in my view.
In my view, it's about 1966, because if you remember, everything changed circa 1966.
Well, okay.
So I'm 4 years before
well, you may have
that.
been a little bit ahead of your time.
Well, hello.
Yeah, and you're also making a transition that's very interesting because we have to make a transition. The whole evolutionary process, because if you take, if I may, if you take that, that can be measured. The destructive can be measured. It exists, and there's new systems, and it's still weapons that are leading the search. That's where the money goes. That's where the institutions, the peer review, all of this kind of thing. They co-opt the intellectual classes by dividing it all up, and a few people own everything. Like always, they have kings and serfs and everything. We're like serfs on a feudal estate. And they're like that, and you've got these things, and we need a vision and the extension on the destructive side. On the positive side, what would be equally significant alteration at the level of capability? You're not talking about the reality, the news that's reported, or the everyday news. Not that. That's just obvious and everything. But at the level of capability, like the fact we can destroy the entire species is capability, what on the level of capability in terms of our extended consciousness would be equally existentially significant on the positive side?
Suppose extraterrestrials came here.
That's where a lot of people go to that because there's an urge to have something to explain things on that side.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of people who think we come from extraterrestrial.
I've always thought that Christ figures or the gods from the skies, that perhaps extraterrestrials mated with apes, and here we are. We are the issue of that mating process. What do you think?
Well,
because if you notice, we have only 1% of the genome separating us from primates.
Well, I'll pick up on that. No, I'll pick up on that because the difference when we kind of got over that thing about the difference between a female and male, back to humanity, people, like a woman and a man. That the difference between them is at a genome level, which you could not have been able to know in the past. It's about 1.5% difference.
That's what I just said.
No, between a male and a female.
Oh.
Now, wait a minute. That's about what they come up with. 1.5. And that's about the same difference between Homo sapiens as a species and a chimpanzee.
Right.
They're not just plumbing. There's difference of mindset and everything. There are differences that exist.
All right, there are differences.
Okay, now
then perhaps transgendered folk have their wires crossed and are indeed women born in male bodies or men born in female bodies.
Well, I try to get away from thinking about gender. I try to think of male and female functions in the universe. And you got to think a mix. And you may be somebody who's a harbinger of that or something. And I think it's really interesting.
Maybe I'm the beginning of a new breed.
Maybe. But
well, Gore Vidal in his book, Myra Breckenridge, says that Myra Breckenridge who is a transgendered woman, she describes herself as, the first of the new woman, meaning of a new breed of assertive and quasi-male.
Well, back again to the idea of the existence of compression or round, like that.
I don't see. Well, now let's simplify.
That's harder because people want.
Fine, but now we should talk about the transgender experience.
Okay. Yeah, okay, talk about it. Yeah, we got good 12 minutes left.
A whole 12 minutes, okay. Well, being transgendered is just the way one is. People don't really decide to be transgendered. They either are or they aren't. And it depends upon if one chooses to act on that or not. And I think the most emotionally healthy people are those who do act on their transgender impulses if they are transgender.
How many people out of the population
I have no idea.
There's no statistics on that?
There are, but I don't know those statistics.
You don't know? There'd be places you could find out.
I would
imagine.
imagine.
Keep records of that kind of thing.
Yes, but again, yeah, there are a lot of trans folk who don't actually transition, who just have those feelings inside and never do anything about those feelings, or there are people, married men who dress as women at home or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you can't, maybe there is no gender and maybe there is no transgender and maybe it's all just an invention, you know?
Yeah, well, okay, but back again, okay, good, that's good. Back to the thing about, I asked you a question, you said that you came up with
well, what was the question? Yes.
I said, what would be equally, within a materialistic understanding of the universe, without going to spiritual things, because you got all kinds of fairy tales.
Cut to the chase, we only have like 10 minutes.
What would be what would be in the reality, that's an existential new reality.
Was that just male being so assertive? Oh dear. Yes, you were saying.
Well, and it would be equally significant on the side of livingry. Let's say we're at a period where we're either going to entropy, we're going to destroy the evolution of consciousness up the hominoid line that's been going on for 3.8 billion years.
But I want to talk about being transgender.
Okay, I'll end it. My suggestion is we transcended in their modelings for it at that time in terms of technology's ability to extend consciousness and make the environment different. We have transcended material scarcity as an ontologic reality. There is enough for all on the trend between population and capability.
Yes, but you notice that there are artificial shortages because that's part of the profit motive.
No, that's a detail. But the thing is that the level of capability, and that line crossed when we got to the point where 50%, there's a lot of modeling, it crossed about 1970. We have transcended material scarcity. There is enough for all human beings. A woman doesn't have to worry which kid she's going to let starve to death because they haven't got food. And with the ecology.
Well,
we crossed that line in 1970.
But now, excuse me, economically disadvantaged people in developing nations and even in our own nation do have to think that way. And that is artificially...
Of course. You're not talking, dear, if I may, you're not talking about reality. It's totally inadequate. It's unjust. The richer or the powerful are still you're talking about capability. When you talk about destruction, they haven't set the bombs off yet. They're about to, maybe, with Iran or something like that. But the thing is, and the capability that we've do you realize what that means? We have the ability to take care of everybody. Everybody can realize.
We have the ability, but not the wish to.
But we haven't had the ability out of history. It's a new period that begins about 1970, and it's an extension of consciousness, and it's a transition to a new way of being. And we may be coming to a point where we're going to come into a new relationship, punctuated equilibrium to the broader universe.
Yes.
And we live in that time. And it does have to do with the compression and tension.
Fine. Now, excuse me, you know that, but people out there don't know that.
No, but that's the challenge.
To inform them?
No, that's the challenge to the whole human society and the world, because it's it's like punctuated, it's like leaving the womb. We're leaving the womb in terms of the evolution of consciousness. And there's these two things coming. Compression, let's put up the curtains, let's make it nice. The justice, all of that, and then there's the impetus to change. It's going through. And what you need is resonancy that informs or works for the whole rather than for the special interests of some group that's going to go off and grab all the grain.
Well, now with
the
internet,
what they've been doing
there's no such thing as exclusive information for a group of elites.
That's one part of it.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we're doing. And you never, and all of our institutions were formulated within a context of scarcity.
Yes.
There wasn't enough.
Yes.
Had to steal from others.
Exactly.
That's changed at the level of capability, and it's never, 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 never mentioned by anybody.
Well,
do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the idea of there being these two functions in the universe not male and female, not gender, but male and female functions, and we got to get it so that it resonates on the edge, going through, resonates and serves the whole.
Exactly.
And we don't have a vision that serves the interests of the entire human society and the ecology that is required, because we're caught up with reified
the pettiness of exactly.
The pettiness of the reified institutions that we've inherited out of history.
But we may, as you've pointed out, transcend that. We may be about to leave the womb.
Transhuman.
Exactly. We may be about to leave the womb of our own pettiness and go out into the larger world of an expanded consciousness.
Yeah, and we don't know what that is because the synergy,
because we are still living in our petty little womb.
Well, it's not so petty, I don't think. It's the only one we know of. I don't think there's any, I mean, there may be...
Do you believe that something is going to happen in 2012?
I don't know. That's Mayan. There's a kind of thing. I think it's just in the air. People feel it. Bobby Dylan says something's blowing in the wind.
Yes.
1970 was
I do not advise anyone to go blowing in the wind.
Well, no, but it...
Right in your face.
No, the thing is that it was a time of, at a level in Koei...
Yes.
There was a artists pick up on that, sensitive people, and it was powerful. And we've been wandering in the wilderness.
And the insensitive were able to sell that to sensitive. The sensitive artists went to the insensitive business people, and the insensitive business people sold it to the sensitive consumers.
Right.
Today, though, you don't have. They are not selling anything. They are selling strictly and completely a materialistic outlook.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have to go, you don't even have to go material, you don't have to go spiritual with that. You don't have to talk about love or any of those things. You just talk about material reality, and you talk about how you're making a transition, and we've been wandering like Moses, 40 years since 1970 in the wilderness. And they haven't got a system in place that takes into account what the future requires.
I believe that humankind has a great instinct for self-preservation, and we will develop a way of dealing with our new capabilities.
Okay. Wouldn't it be nice if it could be brought up in some intellectual quarters that can be understood that this is not your history, that there's a new thing coming, and we have to have a system that the future requires. It has to be just.
Yes,
it has to allow everybody to realize their own capability.
People had to adjust when the wheel was invented, when fire was discovered. Humankind changed, and it will change yet again. And I do believe that somehow people will preserve the human race. I don't think they will give up and let despair engulf us and bomb us all out of existence.
You don't think so, right?
No.
Yeah, I don't particularly. I just had a thing with a guy trying to say Waldheim was a war criminal. Eisenhower was a war criminal.
I think that a lot of people are just bellicose just to be that way.
Well, it's associated with male.
Well, yes.
And it's also associated with this thing again.
Or with women who wish to become, quote unquote, liberated so adopt a male paradigm.
About male and female functions, not men, women. That's what I think. You should get out of the gender, and you got two things. You got compression, the whole, and you could say everybody's got food to eat, all the children live, everybody's got education, everybody's got what they need.
Well, tell that to Africa where they're starving to death.
Yeah, don't do it. That's old. But then the other thing is, then you've got the tendency that goes through it. And you got carbon-60 coming. It's like geodesic, and it resonates on the edge. And it's vertically going through it so that everyone...
We both love Buckminster Fuller.
Oh, yeah. No, he's as good as there is. Yep. But that is a way of seeing it. We should have an animation that, like, you'd have a group going over here, that's Napoleon. That's male. Come with me with my artillery and I'll do it. Or this is Eisenhower, or this is the military. We're going to go steal the grain. It's unjust. It's all been unjust because we didn't have the ability to provide for everyone in terms of growing population, capability trends, until about 1970, qualitative change, and it ought to be once in a great while mentioned.
Well,
and it isn't, don't you think?
Well, you're mentioning it, and that's a good thing.
Well, trying, but also talking to the transition. You made a transition in 1970.
I actually didn't. I just became more myself, which is not... I did not transition.
That may be a metaphor for humanity.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
You see, because the women seem to be much more nurturing.
When, today?
They have a much more...
Than in 1970, or women in general?
You know, the female principle seems to be concerned with the whole. When they were back uniform cellular forms back in 650 million years ago, they would be saying, this is cool. Let's put up curtains and make this nice. Justice to everybody. The kids, take care of the kids, all that and everything. and then there was this other thing that went through, moving like this. And we've reached to a point now where we're either going to have to get a system that serves all. Liberation might be at hand. Justice has never been. It is not now. It's unjust. It's just a few people who have all the power and so forth, and all the realpolitik, and that won't work. And so we have to have an alternative way in which the whole system is going to operate, one that unites the two. Compression and tensional integrity. And that calls for leadership that goes through the whole, with a thing that works for the whole, that is possible to us now after wandering 40 years in the wilderness, when our technological ability got us to that point, which you went a certain way with your gender thing when 1970. But we're at that point now. It's the most incredible time to be alive. You could have lived 305,000 years ago.
Maybe you're imagining the entire universe and no one exists, and we're all figments of your imagination.
I think we're at a point of qualitative, punctuated equilibrium. We're going to come into a new relation from a liberated order, if we make it. If we make it.
I think we will, because I think it's innate in the human being to choose to survive.
It's not innate, because you kept insisting that things are synergetic. Nothing is real. Everything is conditioned. And what it would do is, it's like if you leave the womb, if we make it,
yes,
and there's a liberated humanity, ecologically,
yes,
okay, and we get to there will be a resonancy.
Yes.
Because all there is resonancy between systems at all levels. There will be a resonancy that will inter-accommodate us to universe at a level transcendent to what we have been in for 200,000 years of evolution on this planet, and we happen to live at the time of leaving the birth canal and coming into a new relation, if we make it.
I hope so.
You think so?
I think people expanded greatly after the Dark Ages, and I think we are now about to leave another dark age.
Qualitative transformation at the level of capability in 1970.
Okay.
After 200,000 years. Qualitative. You understand the difference?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. And that it would be good if we stopped talking about men and women.
I agree. I totally agree.
And gender.
I 1,000% agree.
Well, good. Okay.
Okay, there you go.
So
we're calling it a draw.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, it's just really interesting and everything like that. And I just thank you, because it has to do with transition, has to do with being more all-inclusive, including everyone, but also not excluding the idea of the vertical that goes through it, but one that serves everyone. We lack for leadership. Intellectuals are falling down on the job by not talking about.
Well, they're also not given a forum to get their views out.
They got public access.
Well, there you go.
Okay, and everything like that.
And I'm a latent intellectual, so there you go.
You're not latent. You're very vociferous.
I'm blatant, yes.
Latent intellectual, yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that, but it's really an interesting issue. And I think that issue is one that's worth, we should get some of these animating kids with animators to animate that process.
That would be interesting.
That movement, see, it goes up through. And what you need is not something that's going to go all over this way for one group, but it has to go through for the whole, synergetically. And that's feminine. And there's got to be a thing, but it's a lack of, anyway, it's hard because it's something new.